Welcome to Tropic Topics. We are talking about Tropical Storm Brett as well as newly formed Tropical Depression 4. If it gets a name, it would be Cindy, and we'll talk about the reasons for if it gets a name because it's quite possible that it never does get a name. No matter where you're watching us from, if you leave a comment in the comment section, we will try to answer those questions. We'll get to those at the end. I'll try to go over as many as possible. If it's something I've addressed already in the video, I'll just suggest that you go back and watch as far as that goes. But certainly we'll get to those questions and try to answer those. What was going on across the area now, looking live on the tower cam here. It's not too bad outside. Thankfully, things have been a little more scattered today as opposed to the concentration of showers and thunderstorms we were expecting for today. So it's certainly good news, and we will take the luck whenever we can get it because we certainly have that upper low still hanging out around. So shower and thunderstorm chances still remain high as we go throughout the evening hours into the overnight. And unfortunately, again, for our Friday as well, but we'll start to return to a more normal pattern as we get into the weekend. So good news all the way around. Tropical activity shouldn't be much of a bothersome for us either. So welcome for joining us. If you don't have the Storm Track 13 app, mypanhandle.com, wherever you're watching from, Storm Track 13 app is great for whatever you are doing. Beach, boating, forecasts, as well as lightning notifications. We were talking about this yesterday. Spencer, of course, running the show for us. We were talking about the reasons to use it, and getting notification that lightning is nearby before you hear thunder has been something that we have both experienced on the app multiple occasions. So that's a pretty cool little feature for the app if you don't have it. Again, it's the Storm Track 13 app. You can find that on the Google Play or Apple Store. But live on our tower cam here, and of course our temperature 83, but with the dew point at 74, it feels like 90 out there, and the wind out of the south-southwest. That is the sea breeze cranking at 13 miles an hour. Unfortunately, still do have some rough surf conditions, so we've got double red flags still flying. You can see the upper level low spinning across the southeast here. That's what's been plaguing us with the shower and thunderstorm activity. It seems like coastal areas just can't get away from a midnight to 4 a.m. thunderstorm. And unfortunately, we may do that again tonight as well. You'll note that upper low just providing plenty of shower and thunderstorm chances. Thankfully, that trough is a little bit offshore, whereas we were expecting that to be onshore today. So, again, we'll take any luck that we can get, especially when it comes to the potential for flash flooding or even severe weather. So, thankfully, those storms staying a little further south than expected today. So, good news there. But again, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, anything like that, go ahead and put those in the comment section. I've got my Facebook page up. We've got the Facebook page from WMBB up as well. So if you put a comment anywhere, we should be able to find it no matter what they are. Here's the latest on Tropical Storm Brett. We'll get right into it. Brett is being heavily sheared, a little more so than expected, even at this point in time. You'll note that it's pretty far south off course, and it really doesn't look all that healthy. The low-level center is exposed even already at this point in time. Just based on the convergence that happens with friction as it approaches the windward and leeward islands here, the Lesser Antilles, you typically get strengthening just based off of that ability to converge thanks to the friction of the islands. However, this storm really just doesn't look all that healthy. So I'm kind of doubtful that we're going to see an update at 70 mile per hour or close to a Category 1 hurricane. I think this is more likely to come in either steady at 65 or even downgrade down to about 60. But regardless, at some point in time this weekend, probably during the day on Saturday, we're going to see this dissipate in the Central Caribbean as shear is really going to take hold of it. And you'll note that all of the hurricane models, which are the spaghetti models we show here, it's often referred to as spaghetti models, but each one of these lines is an individual model, and they are 20-kilometer models, meaning that they only have a 20-kilometer resolution outside of where the storm emphasis is. That's why you can get some crazy solutions out of these hurricane models and these spaghetti models, because they really aren't taking the outside surrounding environment outside of the storm itself. So the further time step you go down the line, you can get some really crazy solutions. But regardless, you can see that the models are all pretty much on the same board. And by the time we get to it to dissipate, trough grabs it, starts to throw it back across Cuba. But by that point in time, there won't even be a storm there. So really, that'll just be the leftover moisture that gets pulled north on that trough. But that is the latest on Brett. It is moving off to the west at 14 miles an hour, and the max winds at 65, minimum pressure down to 1,002 millibars of pressure. So really a weak storm overall and not of consequence. How about Tropical Depression 4? It's moving to the west-northwest at 15 miles an hour. Minimum pressure down to 1,007, and the max winds, a very minimum depression at 35 miles per hour. You can see it is a small storm and not all that healthy either, but it does have enough convection around a low-level center to call it a depression. It, too, is battling shear, and you can see the forecast for it as well. Really not of consequence to anyone. It may get close to the greater Antilles there toward Puerto Rico, so certainly need to be watching that. But you'll note that it's never really expected to strengthen all that much. It's got about 40 hours here or so of relatively favorable conditions. Wouldn't call them favorable, but relatively favorable condition. And for those wondering, this is unusual to have activity in the main development region out into the Atlantic this time of year. Typically, trade winds just keep things from being able to do anything. And trade winds are playing a role here. That's why we got the shear and why these things don't look all that healthy. It's because it's June. So climatologically, you got a lot of wind out there, and you don't have a lot of favorable conditions. And even though there is a narrow window here of favorable conditions across the Atlantic, it really still is pretty hostile out there. So the warm water temperature for this time of year, as well as the relatively favorable conditions, allowing for a couple of storms to develop, but really not of consequence at all. And this will be a depression by the time we get into early next week. This was should be somewhere north or east of the Bahamas, and then being pulled north with the same trough that eventually is going to rip Brett apart as well, and we'll collect the moisture from that. So neither one of these, really, moisture or storm, are going to make it to the U.S. mainland. So good news on the tropical front there. As we look at our precipitable water, I like looking at this. So this is our wind field and precipitable water, and you can see the two circulations there, the one little notch. This is by Saturday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So by this point in time, Brett has already been mostly sheared apart. There's a couple little swirls off to the south there. That's just geographical features causing eddies to do that. Sometimes those little eddies can get pulled north, and this is when we get these crazy GFS solutions, is whenever those little eddies get pulled off to the north and they spin up into some tropical entity 300 hours out on the GFS model. But certainly not going to be the case this time around. There's a pretty big area of moisture around Tropical Depression 4 back there that's going to help to fight off some of the shear and dry air off to its north, but only momentarily, because as we go into the future, you can see that too gets sheared apart, and it just becomes a little notch as that moisture gets pulled apart by the trough. And then we look back across the rest of the main development region, and you can see all the moisture out there, but no spins or swirls as we go into next week. So there'll be a couple little areas to watch, a little wave that's going to try to come along at some point in time next week. You can see that right there. That's that extension going toward the Lesser Antilles, the Windward Islands, as well as we'll be paying attention to the southwestern Caribbean. We're always paying attention to that area. More times than not in an El Nino season, anything that gets trying to go there gets pulled across into the eastern Pacific, and then we get an eastern Pacific storm. So probably nothing as we go into next week as well. And then finally, you see the big northeast wind coming into the main development region out of the Azores back off to the east there, where the blue and the yellow and the green are showing up. That is finally a high pressure system setting up, which is typical for this time of year, which is usually why we don't see any activity in the main development region, because we get a ton of Saharan dust thanks to that big high pressure system across the Azores. But thanks to the pattern that has bringing us the showers and storms, it's been the same pattern that has helped to bring high pressure across the Atlantic and warm those waters. So we're starting to see that pattern flip as we get into the weekend, and that should turn the tropical activity tap off for at least a little while. So this year, the big term is going to be El Nino, not only for our weather pattern here, because it obviously plays a role. It changes the jet stream, and that's why we've had the unusual severe weather activity, has been all thanks to that big dip in the jet stream thanks to El Nino. And that pattern can be really, really stubborn, and El Nino is notorious for causing patterns that last 2, 3, 4, 5 months, whereas during La Nina or even neutral years, we usually see a change in the pattern about every 15 days or so, which is pretty healthy, because you don't want to see storms traveling over the exact same areas. Same thing as you don't want to see dry areas staying dry over a long period of time. That's how you get drought. So El Nino is a little more famous for drought and flooding conditions, because the pattern just gets stuck, versus La Nina, which favors a similar pattern and similar pattern type of activity, which leads to drought and flooding, but just in different areas. So depending on the ocean temperatures, really can play a massive role in our overall weather pattern. In fact, the oceans probably play the most role in our weather pattern and climate in general. It's just the water temperature out there, as well as the circulations, can dramatically change the weather pattern. So that's what we've got going on. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and put those in. I haven't seen anything yet on here. I do see how many, let's see here. Samantha said, how many do you think will actually hit Florida this year? There's really no way to tell. To be completely honest, it's an El Nino year, so more than likely we're going to see storms stay in the Atlantic. That's what is typical when we forecast stuff. We're not wizards. We don't know everything, and we certainly are just playing the role of a probability game. That's what forecasting is. It's probability. It's not predicting the future. It's not telling you exactly what's going to happen. It's telling you what's most likely to happen, because that's all we know. We don't actually know what's going to happen. No one does. It's impossible. But we have all of these models that give us at least relatively realistic solutions, and then we take that and we say, okay, what is reality based on what we have set up here? And what is the most realistic solution based on our experience and how we see the pattern playing out? And some of that comes into just luck. We just guess at stuff sometimes because we just think that's the way it's going to play out. And sometimes we're really good at that. It's a very good educated guess, but that's what it is. So when we're talking about how many storms are going to hit a certain area this year, who knows? It really only takes one. We have no idea how many storms will even get close to Florida this year, or even the U.S. mainland. We might have 30 storms out in the Atlantic this year, but because of El Nino, they may never, ever get close to the U.S. So that's one of the reasons why I harp on when you go to other pages and you see these social media sites saying 25 storms predicted from such and such agency in the Atlantic. And again, it's the same thing as if somebody said, oh, there's only going to be 10 storms this year. Well, who cares? There's 10 storms that don't affect anyone. It's exactly the same thing if there's 30 storms that don't affect anyone. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So that's why we say keep up with the forecast, keep up with what's going on, because in reality, until we have storms out there and until we have an actual forecast of where those storms are going, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many storms are going on in the Atlantic. It doesn't matter if the Atlantic is 5,000 degrees. None of that matters, because if there's not a storm, the Atlantic could literally be boiling, and it doesn't matter. There's no storm to take advantage of the boiling water. Who cares? So again, it's all relative based on all of that. Those things are just there to get your attention because we're all playing an attention game. So they're trying to push out information to get your attention. Same thing that we're doing. I'm just trying to do it in a more realistic fashion. So I'm trying to give you something that's closer to the truth as opposed to somebody who's going to tell you portions of things that are hyped up that may actually be true, but they're not going to tell you why you don't need to worry about it. They're just going to say, worry about this. And that's what we're trying to dispel whenever we talk about other pages or anything like that. And we don't really ever talk about any other pages. I'm just trying to dispel rumors. So anyways, that looks good as far as that was a good question there. Let's see. What else do we have here? Sam, you're welcome, Samantha. See, I'm watching all of your comments. And yeah, as Rick is right, it only takes one storm. It doesn't matter if there's 30 storms out there. We found that out in 2018. 2018 was actually a weakening El Nino. So that was an El Nino year, but it was a transition year from El Nino to neutral. And then we had La Nina for the last 3 years, which really played a role in all of the activity that we had. So all the other climatological factors are pretty irrelevant. It was more or less La Nina and the pattern that was established that created all of that activity. And even with that, last year should have been hyperactive, and it wasn't. It was a normal year. That was because we had wave breaking. So a big high pressure system wave breaking, crushing what should have supported a very active season, didn't happen. So again, that goes back to those early season predictions. Who cares if you got a bunch of storms out there or not? If there's mitigating factors, it doesn't matter. So looking at a precipitable water, going back to our forecast, tropical activity, that's where we'll wrap it up on that. I don't see any other questions on the tropical activity. And Spencer is shaking his head no over there, so he's not seeing any either. So looking at our area, we are still concerned about the potential for flooding and flash flooding. We do have an aerial flood watch. More or less, that just means the ground is saturated, and if you get storms to repeat over the same areas, you can get a flash flood warning posted pretty easily. We've seen flash flooding warnings around the area over the last 2 days. I believe Houston County had a flash flood warning for a good portion of yesterday around Dothan, as well as portions into Georgia, currently under flood warnings. And then we have several river flood warnings ongoing through the Bend as well. So there has been a lot of rain. And if these thunderstorms repeat over the same areas, that's where the concern becomes. And there's no telling that that is going to happen. It's kind of one of those situational things, like just the trough being a little further south. That helps to keep us a little more dry today. If that had been a little further north, we could have seen those thunderstorms just training over the exact same areas. So thankfully, we're getting a little bit of a reprieve, kind of an unexpected reprieve, but we'll take it. I mean, like, you take luck anytime you can get it. So that's what we got going on. We do have some storms out there. They're mostly along I-10. The sea breeze helping to push those inland just a little bit, as well as offshore. So we'll be watching pop-ups out of the south and west to work onshore, especially as we go into the overnight hours, unfortunately. And we're going to be watching for wherever these boundaries set up stationary, because that is the big concern today. So some heavier storms working along I-10 from Bonifay to Chipley back over to Mariana. Our futurecasts continue to show a pretty good realistic solution, but for those that don't like the midnight thunderstorm, just close your eyes, because our futurecast is once again hinting at the fact that we could have some heavy thunderstorms right along the coast, into Bay County, into Gulf County, right around midnight tonight. And then those could continue into the early morning hours with pop-up activity right along the coast. So, yeah, I'd suggest if you want to get a full 8 hours tonight, maybe go to bed early. And then just wake up with the storms like we all have over the last couple of days, because it looks like we're going to see a repeat of that. And then even into Friday afternoon, we may be a little more scattered with the activity inland. And same thing on Saturday, a little more traditional Saturday. Land breeze, shower and thunderstorm activity near the coast, then sea breeze activity inland as we go into the afternoon. And Sunday, the first day since Tuesday, that we have only a 30% chance at rain. So everyone say hurrah and have some fun with that, because the first real chance of that. And then next week, we look pretty normal for the weather pattern. We might have a couple of days here or there where we have some enhanced rain chances, but this time of year, we should have about a 40% chance of rain. So pretty typical to see a 30 to 40% chance of rain this time of year on the forecast. And that is exactly what we are going to see going through next week. So that is good news. And again, I'm scrolling through the questions here, still not seeing anything. So we're going to wrap it up right there. That's it for this edition of Tropic Topics. Again, mypanhandle.com, as well as the Storm Track 13 app, all great places to get weather information. A lot of times you guys ask me questions, and more times than not, I either go onto the app or I go onto our weather page on mypanhandle.com, and I just screenshot it from there and send you the answer to those questions. So if you don't feel like asking me directly a question, you can probably find the answers that you're looking for on the Storm Track 13 app or on our website, because there are a ton of resources, probably more so than you even realize. We've got rip current information on there. We got beach and boating forecast information on there. We have the rip current safety video on there that is especially important over the last several days as double red flags continue to fly out on the county beaches. So all of those things are important, and I'll leave you with this. If you're here visiting, or you know someone visiting, or you got family or friends coming down or whatever, that's a great place to start, because no one, whether you're coming to visit or you've lived here forever, no one should be getting into the Gulf of Mexico without being able to identify a rip current. If you don't know how to identify a rip current from the coastline, you shouldn't be getting in the water, because chances are you're going to put yourself right into a rip current. And if you can't identify a rip current, at least know how to escape a rip current, and then know what to do if you see someone caught in a rip current, and know a human chain is not the answer. That is typically how you end up with more victims in the water and less people being rescued. So the times that human chains have worked is just pure luck. That is it. It really is a dangerous situation. You're just putting more people into a rip current situation that have to eventually be pulled out. So that is not the answer. If you see someone caught in a rip current, call 911, make sure that if there's a flotation device around, that you try to get that flotation device to that person in the rip current from the shoreline. Don't go in the water after them. If there's a surfer nearby with a surfboard that can go out there, swim out there and get that person, that's a great resource. If there's a jet ski around and you can flag the jet ski to go get somebody, that's a great resource as well. Or you just got to wait on fire rescue to show up to be able to swim out there and get them. Or the best option of all, swim near a lifeguard, and the lifeguard will be able to see the person caught in the rip current, go out and rescue them. Or you can go find a lifeguard if you're near one of the lifeguard stands and notify them that somebody has been caught in a rip current. Those are the best resources and best solutions to if you see someone caught in a rip current. So yeah, all of that resource is available on our website. Please make use of that. It'll make everybody's job a little bit easier. So until next time, hopefully it'll be a while before we jump back on here talking about the tropics again. It is early after all, just June. Typically, we don't start seeing main development region stuff until the end of July, going into August. That's typically when we start to see the MDR heat up. So unusual for this time of year, but thankfully not an issue for anybody across the U.S. mainland.